We are live now on YouTube. Just another 10 minutes until we start the broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. We now can set the moderators and the admin for the webinar management, which is going to be Luis. I'm going to close out from Skype and just get everything ready. In a few minutes, just hold on tight. Thank you so much.
Hello. Luis, Victor, can you hear me?
Hear you loud and clear. Jose.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Victor.
María Soledad, ¿estás con nosotros? No te oímos. María Soledad. Podemos chequear el audio. So I think Luis might put somebody on mute in case there's background noise. If it's quiet, then we can keep it as it is. Then let me try to unmute María Soledad to get an audio check. Let's troubleshoot with María Soledad because we can't hear her.
Ya. Hola, Víctor. Hola, María Soledad está aquí.
Excelente. Welcome.
Hola, amigo. ¿Qué tal? ¿Cómo estamos? Mucha emoción, Víctor.
It's a big day. It's a big day. We're already live on YouTube. So we've got Jose and Maria online and waiting for Daniela Vaz and for Ambassador Lara Duseba. We've had over 600 people register for this event. So it's quite...
Victor, just a quick question from my side. Hola, María Soledad. Saludarte, José. Te mando un fuerte
¿Cómo
abrazo.
estás? Hola, José.
Bien, bien. Víctor, ¿quieres que tengamos la cámara prendida cuando hablemos?
Yeah, you can turn on the camera.
All right. So, you know what? I would need some help now. I will turn my camera on and I will need your help to let me know that I'm face. Oh, it says that the host has not, that the host has disabled the camera feature.
I will troubleshoot that. I see that we have the UAE ambassador and Her Excellency Ambassador Lara Duseba. We're just doing some audio check. Ambassador Duseba, are you able to hear us?
Hi, I can hear you, but I can't start my camera because someone's disabled it.
Great, so we'll open that
Hi,
up.
Victor, how are you?
Great to hear your voice.
Good to hear you.
This is a very exciting moment for coming together and offering the world with a roadmap on how to be more responsive and how we've learned how to better address these challenges. And the UAE has been leading so much on this area. So thank you for joining us.
Not at all. Can someone fix my camera or?
Yes, we are working on that right now.
I'm not sure if it's my IT or yours, because my IT are asking me to join, to turn on my mic and camera.
No, I think it's good afternoon, Jose Vieira speaking here. I think it's the host who has
Who's
to.
the host?
That's a good question. Uh,
Oh, I think
it's the yeah,
it's
because I
Louis.
also get the same message that the host has disabled
Yeah, I just don't
the
know who. It
camera.
says world enabled is the host. That's what I can see on the list.
Perfect. So I'm gonna upgrade Luis Artieda to be the host. And I can get that on just a second. Luis Artieda. Great, so I'd allow you to co-host. There, I made Ambassador Saber co-host. And I'm making Jose Vieira co-host.
Oh,
There we go.
Hey.
Wonderful. Just who's that little guy?
Oh, this is my new guy. He's just turned a year. And
Wow.
he's about to go have his milk.
What's his name?
Faris. Say hi. Say hi. His name is Faris. He loves electronics, so.
Great.
Hi. There you go. This is Mr. Victor.
Excellent. So now we've got
Can I give him
Luis is managing technology. And we have the special envoy, Minnesota not connected. And we'll start in just about four minutes or so.
Okay, great. I'm ready.
Welcome.
Victor, where are you seeing through COVID?
I am hunkered down with my 85-year-old grandmother in Berkeley.
Oh, good. You have to both be careful there.
We're together.
Yeah.
We have really good family and friends. Everybody is very aware of how to best support us.
Excellent.
And it's been nice. One of the things that we realized during COVID was that we want to remember this time as a time for togetherness and a time for like fond memories with each other, right? Because everybody's running around the world and it's an opportunity to be more intentional.
It's true.
And connected with the people that you care about.
I think that's the big takeaway from COVID. I can hear a lot of beeping. I'm putting all my electronics on silent, but I guess we're all going to mute ourselves, or the host will mute us when we're speaking.
That's correct.
Víctor, yo no puedo encender mi cámara.
Okay, let's fix that. So we're getting camera.
Sorry, I don't have a run of show in front of me. Victor, you're kicking off as usual.
Yes, and then you'll be after Angela Boss after you and Desa. Okay, I'm trying to get Luis.
Hello there, Daniela's here. I don't think my video is on, but I'm connected. Hello.
Hi, Daniela, welcome. I'm trying to get my tech. Luis.
Hi, Victor, Charlotte.
Excellent, all of our speakers are on. We're just having some video challenges.
Okay.
Let me just get the right tech guy.
Abre, cacete. Abre o microfone. Abre, meu.
Technology is helpful, but it's also driving us nuts.
Yeah, we're just trying to get Luis to become the host. And I can't find Luis to get him to become a host.
So we are already live on YouTube, I understand.
Yeah, we're on YouTube, but I'm stuck because my tech guy is locked out. So let me work. Give me just 2 minutes, please. Okay. Oh, I see. Jose Vera is set as host, and I can't undo that. So Jose,
Do you want me to disconnect and connect again?
that would be
Victor?
helpful. Yeah. So
Perfect. I'll do that in a minute.
we had the wrong person as host. Thank you, Jose. We did 9 weeks of webinars, and we learned how to make this a very smooth process. And today, well, we have a little bit of restructuring here with the wrong administrative privileges with Jose, but we'll fix it in just a minute. Jose, I can see you're still connected. Maybe if you disconnect, we can activate.
My IT director is on here. Do you want him to help?
Yeah,
He's-
I think we have
What
the
would you
wrong
like him to do?
person. We have the wrong person as host. One of our guests, a panelist, said as host, he just logged off.
Uh-huh.
Now I'm the host.
Who would you like
Now
to be?
I should be able to assign my IT next as host. Co-host, there we go. Okay, perfect, we're done. Now Luis is host. He has the power.
Okay.
Administrative privileges to the right person. So I think we can slowly just get started. We have such a tremendous group of colleagues and partners and friends. And ultimately, when there is a moment of crisis, it's about coming back with the people that you trust and that you know to be able to address challenges together. And for me, it's a tremendous honor to call this meeting together with friends and colleagues that we trust and we know and we've worked with for years and years, specifically because we face so much uncertainty. We know that the UN high-level political forum for the Sustainable Development Goals has undertaken a new perspective or a new sense of urgency. Today's conversation is about an important outcome document that has been endorsed by dozens of organizations and governments, both national and local governments. And it's really about empowering cities and empowering local governments to have a better and more inclusive pandemic response. My name is Victor Pineda. I am the president of World Enabled. I am also a co-chair and founder of the Cities4All Global Compact and Campaign. We have a large group of co-sponsors, especially with UNDESA and the UN Special Envoy for accessibility. And together with our colleagues at the Permanent Mission of the United Arab Emirates, to the United Nations and the permanent mission of Ecuador, we've brought together kind of the leading thinkers from UN Habitat, from UCLG, from the World Bank, the World Blind Union, and others that have really helped us showcase what is the best way forward to have pandemic responses and how to build back better by incorporating what we know works. Next slide. So a quick overview for run of show. We're going to do opening remarks from Daniela Bass from UNDESA and from Her Excellency Ambassador Lana Nusseibeh. And then we'll have, we've had some video comments from the Undersecretary and Executive Director of UN Habitat, Maimuna Sharif, as well as from Emilia Saez, who is the Secretary General of the World Organization of Cities, which is called the Union of Cities and Local Governments. Around 4:30, we'll start off a conversation on the recommended actions and what this outcome document really is about. And then around 4:40, we'll go into 4:45, we'll go into the local actions and what is happening on the ground in cities of New York, Sao Paulo, Montevideo, and Abu Dhabi. Can really hear how these cities have responded and what actions they have taken. Towards the end, we'll spend the last 15 or 20 minutes to really look at some of the most interesting findings from the global survey on inclusive pandemic response and really building a community so that we can move forward together. And again, both the global survey and the webinar series, the 9-week webinar series that we had developed is really a work of a lot of partners, including some sponsorship from the GIZ and the German government, as well as some sponsorship from the World Bank and the Islamic Development Banks. But I think where we start off with is a top line finding on trust. Do people trust that their cities are going to be responsive to the needs of persons with disabilities and older persons? And 61% do not trust that their cities can effectively respond to the needs of older persons, to persons with disabilities. 57% of the respondents also lack trust in the ability of their cities to respond to the needs of persons with disabilities. 44% don't think that their cities have the capacity and the ability to effectively respond to the pandemic. So there definitely is a big gap in terms of how cities are perceived. But it's not only the challenge of cities, it's also the different institutions on multiple scales. It's how effectively national governments work with cities and how effectively international agencies and the governance structure empowers local decision makers and allows for funding to be decentralized to respond to the challenges. Let's go to the next slide. What we've done is, as I mentioned, with our partner organizations, really worked very hard between March and May, April, May, to develop a set of learning series. Over 2,000 people participated in the learning series, over 60 countries represented, and over 40 speakers. And each week, we collected recommendations from our speakers and put together a first draft of a global kind of set of recommendations. These were then reviewed by 14 different leading organizations and provided feedback. So we now have a very vetted, very comprehensive set of recommendations to empower local governments to have better pandemic response and more inclusive pandemic response. We are hoping to launch these again and more the tools with the UAE and with other partners at the UN Conference of States Parties, which has been moved to December, and continue to work with our partners to disseminate these recommendations. They're already, for example, being used in the city of Abu Dhabi, the city of New York, and other places as well. So let's go to the next slide. So today is really about, hearing from our partners and our colleagues and how we can position our respective agencies and our respective governments to really empower more inclusive local responses. I know that, Daniela, you were having some trouble with your video. Let us start with you. And we'll try to just maybe listen to your comments.
So, Victor, are you inviting me to give welcoming remarks?
I am inviting you to give welcoming remarks. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So maybe if there is a possibility at least to show the image of Deza or
Yes.
or my so
We
that
have-
it's easier to visualize. Thank you very much, everyone. It's a pity you're missing a beautiful director on the other side of the screen. But I do hope that the content of these short welcoming remarks compensates the fact that we don't have also a visual contact. So ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much, Victor, and to the organizers for this very important event during the high-level political forum. As you know, the department where I work, the Department for Economic and Social Affairs, and the division I lead, the Division for Inclusive Social Development, are very much engaged now with the organization of the high-level political forum, which is of vital importance to set a more effective course of actions and policies for local governments as well, to achieve inclusive cities for all, which is the theme of today, in time of and recovery from pandemics towards an inclusive, accessible, and sustainable world. And millions of older persons and persons with disabilities are in the midst of this process and action. So I would like to share in these welcoming notes 2 points quickly. The first, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the New Urban Agenda, and the other one, the importance of partnerships between national and local governments in promoting smart cities and accessible technologies in the post-COVID-19 era. The first one, well, let me start with it by setting out the backdrop against which the current pandemic crisis is playing out for focusing, as I said, on the 2030 Agenda. In recent months, the world has had to deal with this devastating impact of this pandemic, which highlights the centrality of all actors. And it is only when we engage all citizens of all ages and of all abilities, all levels of government, academia, private sector, and civil society organizations, that we can ensure an inclusive and participatory recovery. Now, we live in a world of unprecedented opportunities. Yes, challenges, but I want to look at it in terms of opportunities. And we have an agreed framework of action for the way forward in the form of the 2030 Agenda. And this is the time to engage in a strengthened dialogue on how to, sustainable development goals can provide a way for us to build back better. And this agreement is now more important than ever. COVID-19 has exposed the deep inequalities and failures that we knew already existed and that were addressed in the 2030 Agenda and the promise to leave no one behind, a promise that has now attained a new and sobering resonance for all of us. Our Secretary General of the United Nations called for the need to turn the recovery into a real opportunity, to do things right for the future. the best right we know. And the SDGs offer us this opportunity by championing both a whole of government approach in agenda setting, policy formulation, development, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation, and a whole of society approach for a strong, effective, and quality partnerships to address our common challenges and achieve our shared ambitions. And this must be our new norm. We have seen a remarkable progress at the global level on accessibility and disability inclusive development, and it is well incorporated also in the outcome document of UN Habitat, the third conference, the New Urban Agenda. And DAISA, together with the World Enabled and many other organizations, has been an integral part of a disability-focused multi-stakeholder network, such as DIAUD network, who brought forth the Cities4All global initiative. And the second point, in the midst of this pandemic, we have seen local leaders, local government leaders, navigate the complexity of their important roles in responding to COVID-19. So the second point is to focus on the importance of partnerships between national and local governments in promoting smart cities and accessible technologies in the post-COVID era. We have seen them shift their focus on responses that could be implemented in days and weeks rather than months and years. With governments moving forward economic recovery and rebuilding fiscal space, the role of governments will be key in taking measures to stamp out on emerging clusters of COVID-19 cases, and which in our view is of equal importance, to mitigate health and social economic impact of COVID-19 responses that we know are already causing negative indirect effects. And these are borne disproportionately by people who are at high risk with poorer health, marginalized, and with limited access to resources. The crisis calls attention, therefore, to the importance of national and local coordination mechanisms so that persons with disabilities and older persons are included in the preparedness and responses plan. Now, in many countries, we have primary and secondary education falling under this direct responsibility of local governments. And I would like also to underline that this pandemic has brought forward the need for digital accessibility front and center. Accessibility features to end user devices have increased significantly, but digital content and services are still lagging behind in accessible formats. The use of artificial intelligence-based technologies to benefit groups with vulnerabilities, such as persons with disabilities, also remains scarce. We need to focus on universal design that meets the needs of people. And I would like to bring to your attention that the theme of digital technologies and social development will be the theme of the Commission for Social Development in next February. So I do hope that the outcomes of this very important webinar today will feed also into the Commission for Social Development next year. It goes without saying that persons with disabilities and older persons must be engaged at all levels, at all stages of the design and implementation, not just engaged, participate actively. And therefore, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to conclude by saying that in 2016, my division organized an event called United Cities for All as an initiative to celebrate the 10th anniversary of CRPD. The theme attracted the partnership of key local leaders, including the Office of the Mayor of New York City and their Commissioner on Disability, the Governor of Tokyo, who was prepping for the Olympics and Paralympics at that time, as well as the UN Messenger of Peace, Stevie Wonder. And the event was prompted by the UN Global Communication Department and kick-started a series of annual events which have taken place since then on the 31st of October to commemorate the International Day of Cities. So this year, as I said, we anticipate that this event, United Cities for All, where we would love to have you taking part of it, will focus on most probably robotics and digital technologies for all people of all ages and abilities. And we do believe that with your engagement and the engagement of many others, supporting the Commission for Social Development next year for the well-being of all. Could be a very exciting topic where we all can engage governments at all levels. And therefore, I look forward to your fruitful discussion today. And we at the United Nations, DESA and the ISD stand ready to cooperate with all of you in advancing the sustainable development goals for everyone. Thank you so much, Victor. Thank you so much to all of you.
Wonderful, Daniela. Your leadership is tremendous. Your friendship over the years has really put this on the agenda, and we're very much following that legacy of both the work that you and DESA has done and also the work that you and Habitat has done. So it is a great partnership. We've also, since 2015, been very honored and delighted to work with the UAE mission to the UN that's made access and inclusion not only an important area of human rights and engagement for the mission, but also within the context of the UAE has made inclusive urban development part of their strategy. And I had the honor of working in the UAE on the development of the Dubai Disability Strategy. But that's why it was important to include Ambassador Dusiber to the conversation to also provide some remarks as we kick off this important side event. Ambassador Dusiber, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Victor, and thank you, friends. It's really an honor for us to partner with all of you, the Permanent Mission of Ecuador, World Enabled, Special Envoy of the UN Secretary General on Disability and Accessibility, UN DESA, UN Habitat, and Cities4All network partners at today's launch of this publication. The Cities4All campaign, which has advocated for inclusive and accessible cities for persons with disabilities and older persons, has demanded considerable effort, and I commend all the stakeholders for their persistence and determination in seeing this process to fruition. This is a really important priority issue to the UAE, as it should be to every country around the world, where guaranteeing accessibility for all persons is at the heart of our urbanization efforts. So we are looking ahead to ensure that our cities are smarter and better prepared to meet future challenges. And nothing could have made this point more important and pressing than the way we have all had to respond to the challenges for COVID-19 and the way that particularly impacts groups with disabilities and the elderly. And so I think that there should be renewed energy on this mission. In the UAE, just to share a little bit of our own experience for the purposes of this discussion, we've been trying to make great strides to empower people with disabilities and integrate them very much into our society as key contributors. We actually refer to people with disabilities back home as people of determination. And of course, our elderly are an integral part in our culture and our part of the world of our society. So creating those equal opportunities and improving conditions across the country in our city landscape is really essential to their inclusion. And in April 2019, we launched the National Policy to Empower People of Determination, to help empower people with disabilities and enable them to continue to play the essential role that they do play in our country's development. These actions are really grounded in our national vision, and I think that's a best practice I'd like to share here, that it has to be integrated in your national vision. That investing in people, when it's inclusive, when it's sustainable, is the only formula for successful, stable societies. And in a way, this is an investment in resilience for all societies, and nothing has brought home the fact that we are a planet of one health more than the current pandemic we are all facing together, although not equally. Achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development will, of course, depend on the integration of rights and our collective action to ensure that persons with disabilities and the elderly are included across all sectors of society. However, it should come as no surprise that our efforts come at a time when the world is almost distracted with the challenges of COVID-19. And of course, certain groups are considered high risk. And I think that this can take away the impetus for some of the more important structural resiliency work that we need to be doing to make sure our societies are stable. So of course, the containment measures that we've all been undertaking, social distancing, etc., are very challenging for many, particularly those who depend on others for assistance and support to meet their daily needs, but also to continue contributing to the workforce and to their communities. So in the UAE, for example, we launched the National Home Testing Program for people of determination. And that supports those who are unable to easily reach testing centers or who have difficulty communicating with others, have that equal access to the measures we have brought into place to tackle this pandemic. As has been reflected in the recommendations in this publication, we believe that we must utilize this window of opportunity. And Victor, you were saying at the outset that it's important to look for the positive in this experience, where the opportunities lie for us to collectively strengthen our cooperation around these key issues. And we think it's an opportunity, it's a moment to collectively strengthen our efforts around national and international strategies that empower people with disabilities and include them as equal partners in development in every corner of the globe. And I think we can do that by continuing to document their experiences of this pandemic and future challenges, including by identifying the physical, health, and socioeconomic barriers that affect their fair and full and active participation in the cities where they live, and the challenges that COVID-19 bring to bear on those realities. Finally, as we start building back better or building back stronger, more inclusive and more resilient societies, governments at all levels should work together to ensure that cost-effective accessibilities to facilities, services, and information is mainstreamed in all responses and recovery actions. Fighting our way through this crisis in solidarity means that our national and our local governments need to be united, more resilient, future prepared, and inclusive. When visualizing what the future of our local governance structures might look like, our municipalities, for example, we need to reimagine the ways in which we can ensure that all the tools and services offered are accessible to all. I look forward to the vibrant discussions by our esteemed accessibility champions who are lending their voice, paving the way forward, and breaking glass ceilings on how local governments can ensure no one is left behind. And Victor, I thank you as always for your leadership and your vision and your partnership.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I think what you touched upon in terms of the deploying solutions that matter when they matter in the terms and the ways that are most effective is something that we've seen in all parts of the world. But I think the home-based testing was something that many people were concerned about, because if they were trying to get tested and they had to go to the clinic, there would be a lot of challenges to that. So I think that's a very innovative model of providing support to people and meeting them where they are. And I think we'll hear more innovations from colleagues from the UAE later on in this side event. So thank you again for your comments. Can I pass the floor to Luis for a second, as I know that we had a short passage from two other colleagues that were recorded. Okay, so I think we'll skip the recorded message and we'll go straight into, let's see, the next. Okay, there we go. Luis got it. Sorry, Luis, why don't you do the message? Then I think the important part of the conversation this morning is to actually see what we're hearing on the ground. And what we've had a partnership with United Cities and local governments was a partnership specifically looking at what do networks of cities need so that they're more responsive? Because we don't want to provide all of these mandates to cities. Cities are not have the capabilities to respond to the mandates. So let's hear a little bit from Amelia Size, who's the Secretary General of the United Cities and Local Governments. Okay, Luis.
Ah, sí, yo tengo eso. ¿De cuándo? De ayer. ¿Sí? Ah, bueno. Ocupación. Profesora. ¿Le han diagnosticado COVID? No, señor. ¿Ha tenido síntomas? ¿Ha viajado? ¿Ha tenido contacto con personas?
Let's move on to the next. We've had some challenges. Okay, let's move on to the next. We'll share the links, the other messages of endorsement with all the colleagues registered. But both the United States local government they have thank you. Both United States and local governments as well as UN Habitat have worked closely in participating in the learning series. And I think that their messages just reinforce the commitment that they have within their own organizations to elevating the partnership with us and with our partners. So, let's move on to the next part of the presentation, which is about dialogue with the UN Special Envoy on Accessibility, Maria Solas Cisternas, and the CEO of the World Blind Union and permanent representative of the high-level political forum stakeholders and persons with disabilities. So Maria Soledad, you and I had developed a joint statement on COVID and local governments in line with your own mandate. Could you give us some perspectives on what we need to do now and what you're seeing in your role as a special envoy?
Thank you very much, Victor. And I would like to say thank you very much to the audience to share with us this important and very interesting side event. I would like to tell to the audience, in last May, we're unable, and myself as a special envoy of United Nations Secretary General on Disability and Accessibility, prepared a joint statement about local governments, persons with disabilities in relation to pandemic of COVID-19. We recognize when we adopt the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, the accessibility became as a principle of human rights, adopting a specific norm about the obligation of the state's parties to undertake measures about accessibility in relation to physical environment, transport, information, communication, technologies, services, facilities in urban and rural areas. All of these in order to the autonomy of persons with disabilities and to facilitate the participation of all of them in full conditions in all aspects of the life. In our statement, we recognize the most mainstream legal figure in human rights is accessibility in 21st century, based in universal design. In other hand, 2030 agenda recognized and specific SDGs about to make cities and other human settlements inclusive, resilient, safe, and sustainable, with special mentions about accessibilities in relation to green areas, physical space, and transport. No one is left behind. Nevertheless, when we see the effect of the pandemic, we appreciate the lack of accessibility and sufficient weaknesses of accessibility with a negative impact on the life of persons with disabilities and older persons. In general, the protocols don't consider the needs of persons with disabilities and older persons during the pandemic. It is very important to take into account many persons with disabilities and older persons live in poverty and marginality. This situation is aggravated by the lack of accessibility, and the pandemic is increasing this multidimensional poverty. It is very important to work around the remove of the barriers of persons with disabilities and older persons to get the equality and the inclusion. For this reason, we recognize the important role of local and regional governments because they are a direct connection with the population, including persons with disabilities and older persons. And they are the very good position to interact with there are a microphone open with central government to take measures in connection with the welfare of the population and persons with disabilities and older persons, of course. And in this line, local government and regional governments has a very good actors to canalize the implementation, the concrete implementation of accessibility, taking into account the human rights model for persons with disabilities by through CRPD, Sustainable Development Goal, through 2030 Agenda, the New Urban Agenda, the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk, and the framework of the WHO about friendly cities for older persons. In this position, the leadership of local government with the support of central government is very important to consider the inclusive and participatory response to the pandemic with full inclusion of persons with disabilities and older persons through their representative organizations without discrimination, prejudice, stereotypes, and harmful practices. The inclusive and participatory response must consider the proposal about new legislation, public policies, program, procedures, different initiatives to include accessibility, including data collection, capacity building, etc., and the participation of older persons and persons with disability in the evaluation of the measure about accessibility and the participation in the monitoring mechanism about this topic. On the other side, we call in our joint statement to United Cities and local government to collaborate in the strength process to the pillar of accessibility, take it into account the human rights model of CRPD and social development in order to prepare partnerships and different to get the sustainable development, especially the eradication of poverty. Consequently, Global Compact will have a very, very good, important role because this is an alternative for the inclusion and accessible cities and other human settlements in according with different stakeholders, maintaining the relationship with United Cities and local governments to exchange experience, knowledge, etc. All in order to the fulfillment of human rights and sustainable development, and I insist in the eradication of poverty because lack of accessibility is more poverty. In this framework, we can see, we can read, we can connect, we can find the declared action for the empowering of local government in the inclusive response to the pandemic. This is a global call for different stakeholders to undertake commitment and actions based in the principles of the Global Compact, such as no discrimination, accessibility, inclusion in public policies, capacity building, participation, and data collection for development. Therefore, we invite with my friend Victor, we are working together for many times. We invite to the audience to include the information of this declaration for the implementation, the real implementation of accessibility. The declaration are real guidelines to support in the implementation of accessibility. Please, I insist in our invitation to include this document to study because everyone together can reach the goal of accessibility as a pillar for the future development. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Special Envoy, your leadership is tremendous. You'll be addressing the closing session of the high-level political forum on July 17th. And you'll be advancing this image, this issue in front of all member states. When you address all member states at the United Nations, we'll all be behind you so that you can help spread this conversation, this issue, that national governments must work with local governments cooperatively as well. Thank you. Let's move on to Jose Vera, who is the permanent representative at the high-level political forum. Jose?
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. Thanks, Victor, for the invitation. On behalf of the World Bank Union, our president, Dr. Schroeder, and our world leaders, I would like to express our gratitude for being invited to take part in this distinguished event. Let me start by just summarizing some of the key concerns we have as a disabled people organization around the global response to the pandemic. One of the questions that we have been asking ourselves, and I'm sure many of us in this virtual meeting is asking as well, is would the SDG be relevant after the COVID-19? And the perhaps simple answer to that question is yes, definitely. The Agenda 2030 must be the driving the driving factor that can improve the life of people in general, in particular those who live with a disability. But at the same time, if we try to unpack a little bit that answer is, well, what has to be done by governments, the UN system, and even disabled people organizations to ensure that people with disabilities are not left behind? And when you read the different reports and surveys results that many organizations have conducted in the last 3 or 4 months, we can clearly conclude that persons with disabilities were extremely exposed to different forms of discrimination and were not, in many cases, included in the national response plans that were carried out by different governments. Furthermore, we have seen even regressive measures that governments have put in place for people with disabilities. In some cases, we know that governments have been sending people with disabilities back into institutions because they thought it was the best way to protect their health from this COVID-19. So the first question we need to answer ourselves in this new reality and in this new approach of building back better is, how do we really want to build our society back after the pandemic? And what we know from the World Blind Union, and it was one of our first commitment in joining this type of initiative that you, Victor, have been leading for more than 25 years, is that if we really want to be successful in implementing the SDGs with the perspective of the UN CRPD Convention, we must focus our work in the different local government and cities. The answer for that is because we can always agree on the need of improving the opportunities for employment, for education, for accessing to health facilities, even for social life and cultural and sports. But the question is, how do we get to a school? How do we get to our work? How can we ensure that doing grocery is not a challenge for people with disabilities? And those discussions must come at the local level. Cities, local authorities, disabled people organizations working in the grassroots must get together and start planning and implementing a strategy that will lead us to a more inclusive, resilient, and stronger cities for all. And when we read the documents that World Enable has prepared and the WBU has endorsed, it is clear to us that in order to achieve such goal, we simply need to include in our discussion our convention. And even more specific, some CRPD articles that can facilitate and articulate our actions in better coordinating our efforts. We have our CRPD principles. We have our CRPD Article 9. We have our CRPD Article 19. We have our CRPD Article 28 and some more, but definitely those are the ones that we from WBU believe must be at the core of the discussion if we really want to ensure that the SDGs are still relevant after the pandemic. A very specific chapter is or should be allocated to the meaningful participation and engagement of DPOs. We have heard in several occasions that in order to build back better, we need to incorporate the perspective of governments, local authorities, funding agencies, the UN system, but definitely if we want to have disability inclusive responses, disabled people organizations and persons with disabilities in general must be fully included and permanently consulted about their needs and the way we think are the correct manners to implement the different SDGs and the different CRPD articles. Let me conclude by saying that from the WBU, we deeply support this type of initiative. We know that local governments now have more workload than before, but definitely cities and human settlements and local governments are the place to invest more and more in order to ensure that people with disabilities are included. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jose. Both UN Special Envoy and you really talked about the aspect of participation. And I think that raises the issue of global governance and raises the issue of how we can create solidarity with so many different stakeholder groups to each find a solution, each find resources, each find knowledge that could help us create that new system, that new space, that new platform for more prosperity. So as we think about that, and as your call very much echoes what UCLG, United Cities Local Governments have been talking about, which is how do we empower local governments? So not just asking them to do more, but create the enabling conditions for them to do more. That's why I'm delighted to go into the next section of our event, which is in the dialogue with tremendous leaders. We'll very quickly, this is more of an interactive dialogue between Torquato, director of the Sao Paulo Secretariat, on person with disabilities, Sarah Rashanara, chief of staff of the New York City's mayor office, on persons with disabilities, and Fabiana Goyeneche, who is the director of social development for the city of Montevideo, Uruguay. We have also a very important message from our colleagues from Abu Dhabi as well. But I think in terms of hearing briefly from, maybe we'll start off with you, Sid, in just a few minutes from your perspective, how do you think these recommendations that we're launching today can be put into place in Sao Paulo, and how does Sao Paulo's new municipal observatory that you launched, how will that help us collect statistics and analytic data? Better response. Thank you, Sid.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to share our experiences with everybody. I mean, with the whole world. Congratulations for your ability to to congregate, to unite such interesting people for such an important subject. Very quickly, we're working a lot here in Sao Paulo, and honestly, the feedback we have from the population has been very, very, very good. We've been monitoring, we've been talking to around 300 different NGOs that deal with disability here in Sao Paulo, and more closely with around 80 uh, uh, NGOs, some of them that work as clinics that house persons with disabilities, and we've been monitoring all these institutions in order not to happen what happened a lot in Europe and in the United States, that in many cases you had death, you have deaths of the whole of everybody that lived in a clinic. So we didn't let it happen here in Brazil, and we began a series of actions concerning and dealing with trying to mitigate the effects of the pandemic to our population with disabilities. Specifically about the observatory that we launched today, that's one of my pet projects. I wanted to launch it from the first day I began here 3.5 years ago, but we took some time in order to build something to last, and we are gathering data from these associations and from these NGOs and other actions that we're conducting towards about the pandemic, in order to be able to have data about of how São Paulo has been dealing with it. Now we've been doing a lot of actions, but we haven't been analyzing, the effects of things we're doing. We have very good feedback from the families with disabilities and the NGOs, but we haven't gathered this data as yet to analyze it. So one of the roles of our observatory will be to analyze all the data and actually to share with you as soon as we can. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I'm pretty happy with the observatory and with what I said about
One of the things that our colleague Daniela Bass talks about at UNDESA is the need for better data, and her role as the director for the Division of Inclusive Social Development, because to really make sure that there is comparable data on a global level. I know that our colleagues in New York have been cooperating with you through our Global Cities campaign, both New York, Sao Paulo, and Abu Dhabi. All three of you guys that have signed the Global Compact have been sharing experiences. Let me ask Sarah, who's representing the city of New York today, to tell us a little bit about how does the city of New York collect data, both on COVID, but also within the context of the local voluntary review, and what are some of the insights that you're seeing in terms of better responses by the city of New York? In just a few minutes, give us a bit of insights as to that, and then we'll hear from Fabiana in Uruguay, and then we'll play a short 1-minute video from Abu Dhabi. But yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you, Victor. I think data deficit is so prevalent in disability communities throughout all the cities around the world. And I think it's been that case for us just a little, I feel like it's been the case for us for a really long time. So we had to re-strategize on the way that we collect data. And what we've decided to do was work with our urban planners in the city, because they already have so many mechanisms in which they collect indicators. And we had to ask them to apply a disability lens into their work. And so for the past 1.5 years, we've been able to extensively collect so many data points on the disability community in New York City. So just to put it into context for everyone, the population of New York City is 8.5 million people. And we have found that through working with Department of City Planning, more than 10% of the population
She's been talking for an hour. I think that's all that.
Not very good. I'm going to put it straight in the yard sale because I got it from your yard sale.
Okay.
Sorry about that. We're just,
no worries. That was some good music though.
yeah, go ahead, Sarah, go ahead.
So I think of the population, a substantial amount of the population, about 10%, are people who identify themselves as having a disability. And we wouldn't have known that if we hadn't worked with our urban planners. And now for the past 5 months, we have uncovered more, we've done a little more deep dive into that population. We now have a racial breakdown, a gender breakdown, there's an attitude in society thinking that the disability community is comprised of mostly older persons and seniors. However, we found that it's only 30 to 40% of the entire disability community in NYC that are older. We've uncovered economic data, and all of this data is so relevant because then it feeds into how we make or amend inclusive policies. And that is actually one of the recommendations that's in the Cities for All network. And we take that very seriously and we incorporate that into all of our work. I mean, COVID was very hard hitting for all of us in various cities, but I think this pandemic has revealed to us a more deeper inequities that affected the disability community more than any other cohort. And so data is a big part of that.
Thank you so much.
Victor, can I just say something? Sarah, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, how are you doing? We've been trying. We've been talking about finding something in common to work together, right? This, I think this is a subject that we could work together. The cities of São Paulo and New York, maybe putting together a list of items that should that any survey on the COVID upon the disability community. I confused myself here, but anyway, you understand. You understand. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. I think I just want to add to some of our talking points that we're already embarking on an initiative with other cities across the U.S. in building data and knowledge in that manner. What we do is we're building a template of all the social determinants of well-being for the disability community so that we have a standard way of collecting that information. And I think that's something that we might be able to work on with everybody that's in the Cities for All network, kind of have a standard approach to collecting data.
Great.
I think it's very important.
That's very much in line with what we're hearing from a lot of cities. So we want to be able to take the knowledge, Sarah, that you're developing in New York and create that global inclusive cities index to really have kind of a centralized resource of comparable data and then do trainings so that different cities know how to best collect it. I think our colleagues from Montevideo and from Abu Dhabi are going to share some insights in a similar way. I know that Montevideo has started to work with academic partners and mental health experts to try to track mental health challenges during COVID. Fabiana, would you like to say a few words? Again, very, very short, because we're about 10-15 minutes over right now.
Yes, thank you very much, Victor. It's really nice talking to you today. I would like to share that we have experienced since COVID started here. Fortunately, we are some of the cities that haven't been so hard. We have pretty controlled the situation about the COVID itself, but we are very worried about all the inequalities pre-existent and that we have acknowledged that they are going to increase later on because of COVID. I mean, we've heard lots of times that COVID and that the virus doesn't discriminate. Well, we actually think it does. We actually think that this situation, the health emergency, the pandemic, but also the economic and social emergency that comes from COVID is discriminating, and people with disabilities are living it nowadays because of that. And I like to focus on something we have been talking about before. We are worried about economic situation and access for people with disabilities to their rights to food, to public transportation, to the means for life. But today, I'd like to put something on the table about people with disabilities and elderly people, that is homelessness people. We are starting to see more homelessness people in the city, and particularly something that we haven't seen that much before this situation, that is older people, homelessness, older people. And we are starting a program to provide not only a refugee, but also some places to stay during the day, and ensuring that they are also accessible. So the accessibility is a challenge not for all the installation, but also for the ways that we are communicating, promoting culture, access to the different insurance rights. And we think that this is something we need to talk a lot about, because it's a situation that cities deal with every day, because homelessness people are a phenomenon that is present in every city in the world. And now that we are facing this situation with the pandemic and the economic and social situation, and this is going to be an intersection with all the different inequalities that already are living. So we'd like to present this situation because even when we, at least until today, are glad that COVID has affected, yes, many lives that hurt, and we are very sorry that are hurting people, but not as much as we thought it was going to be. But it doesn't mean that the city isn't suffering because of this, and because of all of our brothers and sisters and all of the cities around us that we know they're hurting a lot, and the consequences from the pandemic are going to be also social and about inequality. So just to finish, I like to say that we started this meeting talking about how the SDGs are accountable and are important in this situation. And I like to say that SDGs are relevant in the post-COVID period, but they are even more important now, because if we really want not to leave anyone behind, we have to commit more than ever with the SDGs, because they are the lighting that are telling us where we're going to go, what we need to do, and that we really don't need not to leave anyone behind. And we can only do that if we are trying to do it with more accessible cities and more sustainable cities, because that's what sustainability is about. It's about ensuring a good way of life for every people without compromising the future. And the future is more unpredictable than ever today. And I think we have to think about that more than ever nowadays. So I'm very glad to listen on the experience from other cities. We have a lot to learn from you, and we would really like to share with you what we are experiencing, because I think that the urban agenda is more important than ever, and the global situation has to keep us together even with social distancing.
Thank you so much, Fabiana. We look forward to having Pate Video sign the Global Compact, join the other 30 cities that we have brought together. One of the newest cities that joined us in Abu Dhabi during the World Urban Forum was the city of Abu Dhabi. And here we have a short 1-minute message from Dr. Bushra who will talk about how this recommendations that we're launching today and how the global survey that we've developed on inclusive pandemic response, the two outputs of our 9-week live learning series are being put into practice in the United Arab Emirates and in Abu Dhabi. Go ahead, Luis. Sorry. We don't have audio on Dr. Bush right now. But I think what she describes is a very clear way in which she's been taking the learnings from the webinars series and from the Global Compact campaign and how those have helped Abu Dhabi advance its own disability strategy. But also during COVID, they're using in Arabic the findings of the questions of our global survey, translating into Arabic and disseminating them in Abu Dhabi with all the local agencies. And likewise with the recommended actions, they're also translating them and helping the different city agencies respond as well. So we're gonna share the message of Abu Dhabi also on social media, but yeah, we're really happy to see how all the various cities are doing their own work, but more importantly, how they're working with each other to quickly adjust, adapt, and respond, and then rebuild and build back better. Let's go to the next section of our work, which is really to talk about this insights from the global survey. I want to call on my good friend, Charlotte McLean-Alpo, and just get a quick overview of what we're seeing in terms of this global survey. We had over 400 respondents, about 300 folks that are city experts, city leaders, grassroots advocates, and even cities participated from all 5 of the major regions. So some of the initial findings that we saw was that there was quite a lot of broad responses from East Asia, from Europe, from Latin America, from the Middle East. But we also saw some interesting, some insights. Do you want to just respond a little bit, Charlotte, to what you thought was really important with the survey? And we're just finding some top line findings now, but we hope to continue to publish insights as we continue to collect more responses. Charlotte, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Victor, and thank you to the organizers and to the High Level Political Forum for the invitation. And I really commend you for having such an important discussion. As Victor indicated, my name is Charlotte McLean-Alpo, and I'm the Global Disability at the World Bank Group. I mean, I'm happy to reflect a bit on the survey, but I did want to contextualize it a bit, Victor, and start off by saying that, you know, we've heard from many of the speakers before me that the COVID-19 pandemic represents a severe threat to city services, to the way we access services, to global health, and it's really radically transforming societies in which we live. But I think what's also really important is that we're beginning to see the emergence of the new poor. And I think that that's an important piece that we need to think about. So we know that for many people with disabilities, and I think in some ways this was reflected in the survey, that, you know, they are options that people with disabilities have been advocating for many years, and they really haven't gained much traction. So one example that comes to mind is the fact that we know, for instance, that persons with disabilities for many, many years and even decades have been advocating for remote working conditions. And very little traction has been received in that regard. And yet what we're seeing today in the world is that there's been this huge pivot to home-based work. And I make this point because I think what it does is it shows us that in the grip of the pandemic, given the discussions around the Great Reset, we have a moment in time to really push the agenda for equality and accessibility. And I think this survey begins to point us in that direction. And I think what the survey points out is that accessibility really works for all. I think it's also very interesting, just picking up on the COVID-19 crisis, is that, with millions of people under lockdown or, gradually emerging from it, people without disabilities are for the first time really experiencing at scale how it feels to have barriers and how it feels to have restrictions around how you access services in public spaces. And yet we know that this is a reality that persons with disabilities experience over the world all the time. And so again, I think this is an important inflection point for us to think about how we can really push for the agenda. So I think drawing on the survey and thinking about, as the world puts out policies and procedures for engagement and access to public spaces, we really need to ensure that these spaces and services are equitable and accessible to persons with disabilities. I should note that many of the elements of accessibility are changes and shifts in approaches that organizations of persons with disabilities have been advocating for years. And often it's not just advocacy, it's in addition to the provision of solutions. And what's very interesting is that many of those solutions that DPOs have been arguing for are solutions that could be used for the response to COVID-19. And so again, I think there's some strong synergies that we could look at. I want to take a very simple example of, say, having automatic doors or wider aisles. This is something that DPOs and persons with disabilities have been arguing for forever. And now only is that beginning to gain traction in the COVID response. But I think to address some of the issues and the findings raised in the survey, we're going to need to do a couple of things. One of them is to insist that we require and collect more data that is disability disaggregated, data that is cross-disability, data that captures the barriers experienced by persons with disabilities. But it will also require better diagnostics. But diagnostics, and this is an important point, diagnostics that are informed by and with the voice and expertise and engagement of organizations of persons with disabilities. Similarly, I think what I felt reading the survey event findings was that we're really going to have to look at knowledge and evidence that can be inserted and inform design, policies, and procedures. And I'd like to float a couple of concepts I think emerged from some of what I've heard this afternoon. One of them is when we think about accessibility and we think about cities, we should be thinking about access, but we should be thinking about mobility. We definitely should be thinking about the aspects of safety and freedom from violence, from health and hygiene, from the impact of climate resilience, and importantly, issues around security of tenure. And these are all important issues that need to have a disability lens. So I think as I reflect on the findings, it pointed to me the importance of requiring more robust enforcement of codes and laws where they exist, and where they don't exist, to really explore how we can develop them. So engaging in those discussions around how we develop laws and codes that advance accessibility. And then, Victor, I'd like to just spend a minute or two talking about how we then drill this down to project level. And I think what we certainly need to see is the development and the use of disability indicators so that they can be embedded and present in project design. because I think this will help us understand who the new poor are. Are these people with disabilities? And will help us tease that out. We certainly need to see in cities a lot more accessible and available feedback loops so that persons with disabilities can report on their experiences and interactions with the environment. And again, that's something that I think would really be helpful. But we also need to ensure that all stakeholders are part of consultations and that this is inclusive of persons with disabilities. So at the World Bank, we've done a couple of things. We've developed a range of tools and instruments to advance disability inclusion in our projects. And in particular, in terms of urban spaces. Some of those include the environmental social framework that now has a set of standards, one that makes explicit reference to non-discrimination on the basis of disability, and then a standard that speaks directly to the issue of universal access. And then lastly, around the environmental social framework, we have a standard that requires stakeholder engagement, which requires the engagement of persons with disabilities. We also have a set of 10 commitments that were made at the Global Disability Summit, and therein we have a specific commitment that addresses the importance of ensuring that all projects financed by the bank, that all public facilities in post-disaster reconstruction are disability inclusive. And then finally, we have a disability inclusion and accountability framework that provides a roadmap for bank staff to think about some of these issues. So I think what I'd like to say in conclusion is that the survey results amplify and point to the importance of continued work around developing analytics. We have currently concluded 2 issue papers that look at COVID-19 and persons with disabilities, but we know that there's a lot more space for diagnostics and analytics around addressing how persons with disabilities live in cities. And I'd like to close by just emphasizing the role of cities, of city governments, of mayors, but ensuring that this is always done in close collaboration of persons with disabilities. And then I think when we do this and we work across sectors, we need to have at the central part of our work the notion of trust, the importance of amplifying the dialogue, and mainstreaming accessibility into all design, because we now know that this works for everybody.
Well, that's fantastic. I think that the most important aspect here is that we know that all of the partner organizations, whether they be the development banks, like the World Bank, national governments like the UAE, organizations like UNDESA, the United Nations, or city governments at the local level, really building a community of experts and bringing resources to the table to build that community, to build that path forward. Being mindful of time, we're going to end in the next 3 or 4 minutes, and I'll provide a bit of a closing remarks, and then we'll allow the room to stay open for those that want to see the findings. We've identified some great case studies and some really great innovations, and we'll present those after we conclude the official program. But to give you guys a sense of the way forward and what the next steps is, we're taking the live learning lessons and these outcome documents. And this is the first step, which is really sharing them within the HLPF, and really major thanks to Daniela Bass for the UN and to Maria Cisterna, that's the special envoy, to giving us the space as an official event of HLPF, and seeing how we can take the findings at the 75th anniversary of the UN at the General Assembly meetings in September. So thinking about how our allies can come together around really elevating this work and then taking that to the U20 engagement group, which is an engagement group on cities with UCLG, the World Economic Forum's Future Cities Council meetings, and then in the G20 in Riyadh in November, looking then at the Conference of States Parties. That will be sometime, I guess, in December or later next, a little bit later, and then again looking at other forums where we can elevate both the case studies, the findings, the data, and then the recommendations and put them into practice. What I want to request is that everybody, engage with us and the network. The next few slides will give you some QR codes. So please, if you have a smartphone, you can take a photo of the other QR codes, the next slide, so that you can be part of the WhatsApp learning groups. These are regional learning groups that allow you to be part of the community, whether you're living in Asia, the Pacific, next slide, or if you're in the Middle East, or if you're in Africa. And again, this will be recorded, so if you want to come back, it's also live streamed on YouTube. You can revisit the slides and the conversation and join these WhatsApp groups. But we have now leaders in every region of the world that are sharing resources. During COVID, over 5,000 resources were shared, and a network of over 600 folks are in these regional WhatsApp learning groups. So together we can really make an impact. I want to maybe just allow our co-hosts at the UNDESA to maybe say a final word, or maybe our colleague from the the Special Envoy's office, to thank you all for being here. Maria Soledad or Daniela?
Hello, Victor. Daniela Basso speaking here. I wish to thank you all. This is an amazing work. I also wish to thank the Special Envoy of the Secretary General on Disability and Accessibility, Maria Soledad, who is always very, inspires with her commitment, her passion, her knowledge. You too, Victor, and all the participants. And let's keep working together. The United Nations Secretariat gives the space, virtual in this case, to unite in order to support the endeavors of member states to provide the best policies to make the life of the planet and the people better. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Maria Soledad. Any last words?
Thank you very much, Daniela, for the support of UNDESA, because all of us are in the same way. In my opinion, we need, in a few minutes, to say we are in the same line. And it is very important to think that in our future, accessibility will be the most important goal in relation to our work. And on the other hand, it is very important to support the work of local government and the environment of central government for concrete steps on accessibility with full participation of civil society, especially older persons and persons with disabilities. In this line, in my opinion, is very, very important to come with the support of United Cities and local governments, obviously Global Compact, and civil society. We are working for many years in the topic of accessibility and supporting at the same time the policy of the Secretary General about the accessibility, the mainstreaming in accessibility inside United Nations, and the synergies in this topic in this period of pandemic imply to us the obligation to work in different sense on accessibility, taking into account the international cooperation, the fiscal space for the national state parties. And I am sure with the support of civil society, we can see accessibility as a reality in a close future. This is my opinion in this moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Again, just the last thing is Ambassador Dusevik, thank you again for allowing us to have you join us for this discussion. It's always a tremendous honor to be with you. We do have some case studies from both Dubai and the UAE and some really interesting insights from other cities. So we'll end the official portion of this conversation, and those that want to stay, I want to thank the review organizations as well that participated in the review of the outcome documents. And all of you that registered to this event will get a copy of the outcome document that you can distribute within your networks, and that we can all know what we need to do and how to do it. And we can all be empowered to do our parts. Thank you again. We'll end the official portion that I'll provide in just after a minute break, 1 or 2 minute breaks. I'll provide overview into the findings. Thank you all for being with us on this important launch of the recommended actions for empowering local governments in partnership with UNDESA and the UN Office of the Special Envoy on Accessibility. So we'll just take a 1 minute break, and then I will come back and provide you with an overview of our findings.
Hi, Catherine. I think you're, there you go. How you doing?
Hear me? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Let me try to play. We're trying to show you guys the messages from our colleagues. So I'm going to give one last attempt to share the video. If I can be made host, Luis, if you can make me host, I'll be able to share the video that I have on my screen, and then I'll go into the findings. Because both our main partners have given us really great words of endorsement. So I'm going to share the screen. Okay. So here goes. Great. So I'm going to share this video. Let's see if you guys can share it. All right, testing the video now.
Excellencies, city leaders, partners, friends, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning, afternoon, evening.
Hello, Victor. How are you?
I would like to start by thanking
Hello, Victor and team.
And the Cities4All partners for the incredible work in organizing the webinars, learning series, and the global working groups, where all stakeholders in our cities were able to come together to exchange knowledge, best practices, and recommendations to guide inclusive responses to COVID-19 pandemic for older people and all persons with disabilities.
How are you?
Pandemic has laid bare the need to reshape our cities and the way they are conceived. It is now clearly inherent that everything we do during and after the COVID-19 crisis must have a strong focus on building more equal, inclusive, and sustainable economies and societies that are resilient in the face of pandemic and many other urban challenges that we will face. COVID-19 has affected all countries around the world, and we cannot downplay the importance of local governments and communities, especially in the implementation of interventions locally and in adapting to a new ways of life and business. Globally, local governments are on the front line in the fight against the spread of the coronavirus and will play a pivotal role in public health interventions and tackling the needs of persons with disabilities and older persons during the pandemic. The Sustainable Development Goals, SDG, the new urban agenda, and the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction recognize accessibility as a human right and a precondition for older persons and persons with disabilities to live independently, participate fully and equally in society. With a clear mandate, leaving no one behind, there is an opportunity for cities to shape a more inclusive and accessible urban future for all in the design of infrastructures, environments, programs, and services that can be used by all people. Persons with disabilities and older persons must be included in both immediate and future effort, not only as beneficiaries, but through participation at all levels to design accessibility policies and frameworks. These will serve to address the exclusion and discrimination, therefore creating more resilient communities and systems. The COVID-19 pandemic has proven not only to be a health crisis, but an urban crisis aggravated by intersecting challenges and multiple barriers to the participation of the most vulnerable groups. We therefore need to retain our urban spaces, services, and systems to reduce barriers and prohibit discrimination to ensure that equity and inclusivity are positioned in the center. As we build back better, I call for all stakeholders, national and local governments, to work together and ensure that these recommendations are put into action to deliver interventions that will promote equal and inclusive response and recovery. Let us all commit to universal inclusion as we aim for the realization of all human rights for sustainable development. Thanks very much to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to this Cities for All webinar, Equity and Accessibility in Times of Pandemic. It has been quite a ride that we undertook together to ensure that cities around the world territories leave no one and no place behind. We have been working really hard, and I am grateful to the UN Special Envoy on Disability and Accessibility, and also to World Unable for helping us show the path for local and regional governments to be inclusive and to ensure that indeed nobody is left behind. We have come to understand the limitations that some of our communities face. We have come to understand also the challenges that local and regional governments face when trying to provide adequate service provision for these groups, for these people. And we have been able now with this new situation with the pandemic, where our weaknesses are so clear and has become so empirically proved, We have come now to realize that there are some critical issues that we need to tackle together. And that is something that no single sphere of government and no single actor can do alone. If we want accessibility for all, we will need to link it to universal service provision. We will need to ensure that everybody has access to communication, to information, and to innovation. We will also need to ensure that there is enough capacity building to those service providers to make them truly inclusive. And we will need to ensure multi-level governance and also a multi-stakeholder collaborative approach, which is something that is guaranteed if we work together within the framework of Cities for All. We also know that it will be critical to address the digital divide and that we will need to know how big our challenges are by providing disaggregated data on these topics. Well, colleagues, we know a lot right now. We have been building this collective knowledge, but we now need to build the alliances that can actually work together towards transformation. We will need financing, we will need innovation, and we will need political will. And political will is what our constituency can guarantee. So United Cities and local governments looks forward to continue this work with you and wish you all very constructive discussions. Count on us, please. Count on local governments and United Cities and local governments. We are with you. Thank you very much.
Great. Fantastic. Fantastic. So now let's dive into the findings. We have a good group of people that wanted to jump into the findings. I know that I see that my friend Paul Mugabe has his hand up. Now, Paul, I'm going to jump into the findings of our global survey. I want to make sure that you can just say a few word or ask a question. I'm going to unmute you. Well, maybe you're on mute, Paul. Sorry. Okay. So let's jump into the survey findings. I'm going to open that up for us now. Here it is. And I'll share the survey findings. Great. Can everybody see? Can you see my screen? Great. So let's dive into the findings of the survey, because I think you'll see a lot of very interesting insights. I want to make sure that everybody can hear me okay. And I will play the message from the last few messages from Dr. Bushra from Abu Dhabi, and then we'll close off this session.
Hello, Victor. How are you?
Oh, there you are. Good to hear your voice. Paul,
Fine.
where are you connecting from right now?
I'm from Kenya. I'm in Kenya now.
Fantastic. So, do you have a question? First, we have 100 people on the line right now. I'm about to read the survey findings.
Okay. I enjoyed the session. It was good.
Great. I'll come back and speak with you a little bit later. I'm gonna present the survey findings.
No worries.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, here's the findings from our global survey. We developed the survey in partnership with the World Bank. And the survey really tried to immediately get our signatory cities and our partners to really give us insights into what was happening on the ground. And one of the questions that we added at the end was a question about trust. One of the questions that we had were grouped along the 6 key areas of the Global Compact on Inclusive and Accessible Cities. And those 6 areas are non-discrimination, accessibility, participation, inclusive urban policies and programs, capacity building, and data for development. Now, we took some of the findings of this survey and grouped them both from a perspective of the findings, but also to illustrate how recommendations have been developed through those findings. 70% of respondents agree that persons with disabilities and older persons face discrimination in local COVID pandemic responses, specifically in inequitable access to services and information. That's linked with recommendation 1.6 of the launch document today. That it shows that we must ensure that local governments deliver accessible public information and public communication that is free of discrimination or bias and that is respectful to all groups. So you notice that as we go through each one of these, that we've also identified ways that cities have responded. So for example, in Dubai, the Dubai municipality ensures that COVID-19 information was made accessible with captions and picture-in-picture sign language. So whenever there was a public information, they really worked hard to make sure that also the vast majority of governmental digital platforms adhere to global web accessibility standards. This is also the case in cities like New York and Barcelona and Sao Paulo. The next area that we found is in the area of accessibility. And one of the survey questions asked about whether you agree or disagree that cities ensure public facilities and services are accessible. And again, this very much links accessibility to a human rights issue. 60% of the respondents either disagree or strongly disagree. The recommendations to ensure that local governments guarantee access to clear, consistent communication via multiple means, formats, languages, and channels. And consider that many people, disabilities and older persons, may live in poverty or informal settlements or temporary settlements and may not have access to formal education, internet, or mainstream communications. So how do you provide that accessibility in a variety of different settings? Well, one of the ways that we're looking at that from the perspective of New York, as we mentioned earlier, is a guide that New York developed on accessible virtual meetings. But also, if some participants or some cities don't have access to virtual meetings, is how do you disseminate the knowledge through other means, whether it's radio or whether it's community organizations that might have a better connection to the local communities that they serve. Another example here is the city of Barcelona that looks also at this issue of transcriptions and other data, but what we need to look at is how that happens in informal settlements. So if you have any examples of accessible COVID responses in informal settlements, please send it to Diana at worldenabled.org, and we'll leave her email address in the text box. In the area of participation, we asked whether respondents agree or disagree that cities can effectively coordinate and collaborate with stakeholders, and a little bit over half disagree or strongly disagree. So we actually have some cities that do better than others on the participation. So we wanted to make sure that one of the recommendations was that broad range of stakeholders, including people with disabilities and the organizations, are involved in the design and the recovery plans and can properly assess the urban landscapes, the risks, the policies, and ensure that they are being more responsive. Another example from New York is the emergency management unit shared an example of how they really are engaging with community stakeholders to really ask what the impact of some of the policies could be on people with disabilities and older persons. In terms of the area of inclusive urban policies and programs, 48% disagree that their city provides open and accessible communication. So a lot of the findings is in terms of the pandemic response is how you provide clear policy measures that are consistent in both communications, but also in the messaging and the responses in the post-pandemic. In Curitiba, Brazil, the city provides telecommunication services that are accessible, again, an area of communication, but also provides live video chats and video relay services through sign language center. In Montevideo, they developed a citywide accessibility plan. And during COVID, they've also provided sign language interpreters. And in partnership with academic partners, we mentioned, they're looking at new research related to new policies and programs that address mental health and isolation and depression. And then we have other examples from Lima, Peru, and other places. And we'll be working on the publication over the next few weeks. So we want to continue to sort of engage with you if you're interested in being part of the group that's developing this publication or want to serve as a reviewer. Please leave your email address in the chat box or just connect with us so we can work on really making this publication be user-friendly, both from the data side and looking at how to expand the survey, but also from the recommendation side. Do you disagree that your city uses accessible technology to deliver training and education programs? So there is quite a bit to do on ensuring that technology in both developed and developing countries are equitably distributed and then used to provide training. Because one of the things with COVID is disrupting existing models and existing work. And there's going to be a lot of retraining that's needed. So how do local governments actively support programs that guarantee accessible online learning platforms and also distribute the tools equitably so that various communities could engage in that upskilling and the retraining that's going to be needed as we move forward? Again, an example for New York, remote technology was provided to primary students. The mayor's office really worked closely to ensure that some of those tools and iPads or laptops were given to poor families. In terms of data for development, a big portion, 57, disagree that the city is able to collect disability disaggregated data, and 45% disagree that the data is disaggregated on older persons. So there seems to be more disaggregation by age and not as much on the disaggregation by disability categories. So it's important to follow disaggregation, which means that when you have a survey, you ask whether these beneficiaries or participants also experience other challenges. And we recommend the short form survey of the Washington group to do that. And those are questions like, do you have difficulty seeing without glasses? Do you have difficulty hearing in crowded areas? Do you have difficulty with self-care? We mentioned the Sao Paulo municipality launching the observatory, and we want to work with them on the Inclusive Cities Index. And in Abu Dhabi, we're looking at really interesting ways that they're using our pilot survey, disseminating that in the region, and also looking at other stakeholders in terms of how to register and get other agencies to really localize the responses and recommendations on the ground level. So those are some top line findings. Again, we want to build a community with you guys and help us continue our advocacy and our knowledge sharing. But we can only do that if you join these networks and these WhatsApp groups. And if you aren't able to join the WhatsApp group, please leave your message, your email address and we'll be ensured to engage with you. So now we'll just quickly share the last video, which is the video from Abu Dhabi. And that takes us to the top of the hour. And I think that's here. Video 2. Please let me know if you can see this. Great. Do you hear this?
Greetings from Department of Community Development in Emirate of Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. As part of our strategic partnership with World Enable, we would like to thank you for inviting Department of Community Development to be part of this global event. Department of Community Development's mandate is to ensure social protection for its citizens in the Emirate of Abu Dhabi, including people with disabilities and their families. Therefore, we are committed in ensuring inclusive emergency preparedness policies. In line with this mandate, Department of Community Development have reviewed the document recommendation for empowering local governments in the context of an inclusive pandemic response and endorsed it. In fact, the recommendations and actions align with relevant international development frameworks, namely UN CRPD. Moreover, Department of Community Development will be launching the global survey on inclusive and acceptable pandemic response and disseminated in Abu Dhabi, as this will enable us to establish data-driven policies and actions. Finally, we are looking forward to translate the recommendations and the outcomes of the global survey into action plans that will impact positively the life of people with disabilities and their family. So thank you for listening and see you soon.
Hello everyone, my name is Marianne Waite and I'm the Director of Inclusive Brands at The Valuable 500. And for those of you who haven't heard of us, The Valuable 500 is the global CEO community revolutionizing disability inclusion through business leadership and opportunity. Now, our ambition is to fundamentally transform the global business system to create an equal and inclusive society for the 1.3 billion disabled people living in the world today. Now, as you probably know, disability has been historically viewed as a governmental or a charity issue. And what we want to do is to move to the valuable market model, which sees business turn their power and resources to meeting the needs of people with disabilities. And in order to do this, and in order to design and build environments and cities that work for as many people as possible, we need commercial business to hire, represent, and build with disabled people. And it's the CEOs of these organizations that can truly make this happen, which is why we're looking for 500 global business leaders to make disability their business. And as you'll discuss, no doubt, later in this webinar, the universal benefits of inclusion and disability innovation impact nearly all of us, not just regarding current containment measures, but also with regards to restarting economies and helping all of us, or as many as possible, not just survive, but also to thrive. Building inclusive environments will help us manage the aftermath of the pandemic in an immediate sense, but also allow us to future-proof aging populations and to facilitate a much more efficient way of living. So if you'd like to find out how to make disability your business, please feel free to reach out to me or to anyone in the Valuable 500 team. And we're absolutely delighted to be involved with the Cities4All global campaign. And we're very excited to work together potentially and to build a more inclusive and enabled world for all of us. Thank you so much and enjoy the session.
Dear colleagues, I'm Dr. Shruti Cho. So what has COVID-19 taught us? COVID-19 made no secret of health inequalities. older persons with non-communicable diseases and disabilities suffered the most. And we also learned that good governance saves lives, while bad politics kills. So how do we develop a more inclusive and resilient society? In the place where I served, we implemented age-friendly city initiative developed by WHO in all the cities and counties. And we managed to have less than 500 cases of COVID-19 in total. We have better political commitment to health and equity. We have better mechanism of whole of government and the whole of society communication and collaboration. We have more resilient, age-friendly healthcare system, and we have more empowered older persons with better health literacy and the universal practice of self-protection.
So that is the presentation. I'm fine to open it up for any immediate responses for just a little bit. Maybe our colleague Gabriela Hidalgo from Arcadis, or Catherine Klein, or anybody else that's still on the call that has something urgent that they want to share or pressing. Again, I think for us, it's really about building a community of people. I know that we still have also the chief of the secretariat on the CRPD, Ms. Akiko Ito. So if she wants to say anything on this webinar, we want to continue to make these webinars effective and useful to you all, but I know that we're already out of time. We want to really encourage everybody to distribute the declared actions. You'll get everybody that registered for this. I'll get an email. If you're looking at the YouTube link on the live stream, you can email us at signup@cities4all.org, or just sign up on the website cities4all.org. Thank you all for being with us. If nobody has their hand up or nobody else has anything to say, we'll just conclude the discussion. Oh, I see there's Rory Bonshane wants to say something, so let me just have a short intervention for Rory and then we can close. Rory, I think you should be able to speak now.
Oh, thanks. I just wanted to know if you could please repeat that information or put it in the chat before you close off this Zoom webinar.
Excellent, thank you for that. I will share it in the chat, but the websites for us are www.cities4all.org. You can follow us on Twitter at World Enabled or Instagram. And you can email us at signup@cities4all.org. We're also, because we went over, we lost our captioning, but we'll make sure that you all receive a copy of the slides, as well as the transcript and the final document in the next 24 to 48 hours. Thank you all for us from San Francisco for joining us. You've been a tremendous colleague. We'd love to get San Francisco to sign up to the Global Compact and get Mayor London Breed involved as well. Okay, any other cities, you can list your city in the chat box. If you'd like to get your city to sign the Global Compact and campaign, you can share that website with them as well. All right, well, if there's no more raised hands, I will close the session. Thank you all for being with us for this launch. Have a great day.